Welcome to Tokyo Game Life, a Tokyo-based video game podcast focusing on Nintendo and gaming culture in Japan's capital. Your host Mono here to bring you a slice of gaming life from Tokyo. A huge summer game season is about to start, but you know what was the first summer game? Baseball. And this episode's feature is about an iconic Japanese baseball gaming franchise, Power Pros. I'm joined by Danny Bivens, one of the hosts of the Famicast, to dig deep into how Konami's cartoony baseball series has managed to stand the test of time. And yes, I'm still playing Tears of the Kingdom, and I'll share my 5 favorite moments from the game so far. Plus, a dip into some Nintendo and Japanese news. Let's start with a feature on the Power Pros series with Danny Bivens. Tokyo Game Life, only on the Tokyo Beat Podcast Network. We're in the midst of baseball season, and there's no shortage of great Japanese baseball games. However, there's one series in Japan that has managed to survive the test of time and reach audiences of all generations. I'm talking about the Power Pro series from Konami, also known as Jikyo Powerful Pro Yaku. Joining me to examine this long-running baseball series is a special guest. So guest, please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Danny Bivens. I'm the host and editor of the Famicast, podcast all about Japan and games. Yeah, I'm a big Japanese baseball fan too.
Thanks for joining me. I'm sure there may be listeners who have never heard of this series. So tell us, what is Power Pros?
So, as Mono said, Power Pros is from Konami. It's a baseball series that's been going on for a long time. And kind of like the thing that sets this game apart is the unique characters. They're round, kind of cute, very unique compared to pretty much any other baseball game on the market. And yeah, underneath this cute facade, as I kind of like to say, at least to myself, when I'm talking about this it's a pretty deep simulation baseball game though.
The thing that sticks out for most people is the look of the game. It's incredibly simple and has cartoonish graphics. It kind of reminds me a bit of like Rayman and Bomberman mixed together because of the huge heads and the lack of limbs. What do you think about this art style? And do you feel like it holds the franchise back, or is it part of its appeal?
I really think it's part of the appeal. I mean, when it comes to games in Japan and especially like sports games and stuff like that, I mean, you do have companies, even Konami, that, develop realistic looking games, and they've done that for a long time to varying degrees of success. But I think with something like this, and especially with the Japanese market, I don't think Japanese gamers are always looking for something that's hyper realistic. Maybe not as much as like what maybe we might do in the West, which is maybe why you see things like this be successful and just be more appealing to Japanese gamers here. Kind of like that cuteness factor. I think that seems to be a bigger drive. Obviously not like 100% for everybody, but I think it just gives it a little bit more appeal.
How did you first discover the series, and what about it hooked you compared to other baseball games?
So for me, I first played MLB Power Pros on the Wii back in late 2007, early 2008. I don't even remember how I picked it up. I was living here in Japan at the time, but I think maybe on a trip back for Christmas or something to the United States, I just picked it up and just played it. I had read about it, and I thought the visual style was really cool, and what really grabbed me too, something we're going to talk about a little bit later, I think, but the success mode, like kind of like a deep RPG like mode that this game offered. Now, I mean, at the time, a lot of sports games were kind of testing the waters with some kind of very limited story modes or kind of like RPG like modes in their games, but nothing quite like this. So I thought that was just a really unique thing to have in a sports game, and I just had to try that out.
Yeah, the only Power Pros game I've played is, of course, MLB Power Pros, like yourself, because it was the first one to come to the States. And at that time, I think that was my peak baseball fandom. And especially if you're a Wii gamer, and there was a lot of probably shovelware baseball and sports games. But this one seemed like a really high quality and well-made MLB game. So I think it had quite a lot of appeal for Wii-only gamers who wanted something with a bit more meat on it. And like you mentioned before, it has a lot of unique modes, such as the success mode, which has been in the series since the third game, all the way back on the Super Famicom. Could you expand a bit more on what is the success mode and why has it become a staple of the franchise?
So yeah, success mode, it's kind of like what I had mentioned just a little bit previously. It's basically kind of like an RPG-like mode that Konami put into the game. And the idea here is that you're taking a player and you're basically building them up over time with like the goal of trying to get them to go to the pros. I mean, there's been a lot of iterations of this over the years, even in the most recent stuff. Like they've kind of been expanding upon this year after year. But yeah, basically it kind of remains the same, but just with some different twists. And I think one of the other appealing things of this mode too is that this has kind of allowed Konami to make a lot of different characters that are exclusive to the Power Pro series. I don't know if you, Mono, if you'd remember like some of the characters from playing MLB Power Pros back in the day. I mean, I sure didn't, when I came back to play it much later. But yeah, I think Japanese gamers, since this has been a main staple for a very long time, I think it was a thing that they could just be really familiar with and actually just come to like and even love over the years.
So are there characters that kind of carry over from game to game, like established characters?
Kind of like oh my gosh, there's a guy, I think his name's Yabe. He has like glasses and he looks kind of like a nerd, but he's been in, I think, all of the most recent Power Pros games that I've played, like on the Switch, like in that mode and a couple of other things too. So yeah, I'm pretty sure there are a lot of them that do carry over.
There's also My Life mode, which seems to be kind of similar to Success mode. How are those two modes different, and which one do you prefer?
So, yeah, I remember when I first learned about both of these modes, I was like, wait, what is the difference? But it seems like My Life kind of mainly focuses on your journey to being like a pro player. I'm
Hmm.
trying to remember exactly where you start, but it's focusing just on like Japanese professional baseball and like doing that. And then on top of that, you can do other things too, go on dates, get married, and, stuff like this. You can do this type of stuff in success mode too, which is kind of cool. But yeah, it just seems to me that, My Life focuses more on the professional side. I think back when there was no My Life mode, I
Hmm.
was pretty keen on success mode, but kind of like playing it recently, it's really wordy. Like
Hmm.
they're talking a lot, and it doesn't really give you a lot of opportunities to play games. If your sole purpose is to go in and like hop in and play some baseball, you might have to sit around for like 20 minutes or something like that going through dialogue before you can get to any like baseball.
Right. Ironically, the franchise is pretty groundbreaking in a lot of ways because it implemented these modes where you focus on a single player much earlier than a lot of other sports franchises. Now, career modes are a staple in all sorts of sports games. What do you think makes a really good career mode in general?
Hmm. Very good question. I think lots of different options that have an effect on like your character.
Hmm.
Some things that I like are, conversations that you have about your contract or stuff like that, or basically kind of like rounding out your personality with like the media or something like that, or with your friends in the game or something. I think that type of stuff's pretty interesting. Other series too have kind of done this, as you mentioned, like NBA 2K. MLB The Show kind of does this a little bit, but not really as much. But NBA 2K does a pretty good job of this. Like, depending on the game and their My Career mode and stuff like that, you can make yourself be kind of like a jerk and hated by the media, which is kind of fun. I mean, you could also just be super serious. So, like, yeah, I think, yeah, some of the stuff that Power Pros was doing really did have some kind of an influence on this, because just even thinking about it with 2K and stuff, their career modes kind of took off probably just, I don't know, a couple of years really after MLB Power Pros came out in the US and
Right.
maybe a few other regions. But yeah, I think that had some kind of an influence on what was possible in sports games. And what I always thought was cool too, like, growing up and playing the sports games on like, Super Nintendo and N64 and stuff like that, I always wanted something that was like an RPG. And, little did I know at the time it was happening in Japan with Power Pros like so early on. But, for us in the West, it just seemed like that was just some kind of pipe dream that would never happen. But now, now it's a thing.
Yeah, when I played the My Life mode for MLB Power Pros, I chose my character to be a closer.
Uh,
So he would only really appear in the last inning kind of randomly, which I thought was
mm,
kind of fun because
mm.
so many games would pass before my character would ever appear. And since you play so many games, you really don't want to spend a whole lot of time on each one. You kind of just want to bat for maybe 3 times per game or maybe pitch for like an inning or two. So I think the career mode is kind of interesting how it's evolved and how it's becoming like more of like a almost like a visual novel in the years.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, because yeah, I mean, I think too, the older we get, the less time we have to, sit down and put in like hours and hours into games. So I think
Mm,
having career modes like this, where you are just taking bite-sized parts of games, that's really awesome. and you're just seeing like kind of what you want. You want to see how your character can evolve and get better. So I mean, it's kind of like a win-win in that situation.
Outside of success mode and my life mode, are there other interesting Power Pros modes?
Yeah, there's a mode that I really like. It's called Live Scenario.
Hmm.
It's been in the past two games on the Switch in Power Pros 2020 and a Power Pros 2022. And what this does is it takes certain situations from real games that happens here in Japan. And Konami makes these pretty much every day that there's a game, they make these, usually within a few hours after the
Oh,
games have
wow.
concluded, which is nuts. And they do it for both sides, both teams that are playing. And basically they pick a key point in the game for both sides and to say like somebody's to put you up as a pitcher and like, hey, stop these guys from getting runs. There's a guy on first and third, you have no outs, close them down to win the game. Or it's like sometimes it's general, get through this inning, get a couple runs. Sometimes it's like hit a home run with this guy who has no business ever hitting a home run because it happened in real life. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And if you follow Japanese baseball, I think it's even more exciting because then you could kind of like relive the moments that are going on. Personally, I I follow a lot of the Saitama Seibu Lions, the team
Hmm.
here where I live. I watch pretty much every game, so it's always kind of fun to go in and try out the mode. And especially when they're doing really bad, you're like, okay, this is the only way I could see them win.
Yeah.
Is it in
Y-
game? So
You can like correct everything through Power Pros.
yes, exactly.
So we talked a lot about MLB Power Pros, and there was a big gap between releases because finally this year we got a new game for the Power Pros franchise in the West, WBSC eBaseball Power Pros. What was your reaction to the announcement, and what are your overall thoughts on this game?
So with that one, I was watching the Japanese version of the Nintendo Direct. So
Hmm.
I was like, oh, okay, well, here's another baseball game for Japan. And then I think I saw on Twitter that people were like, holy moly, this thing is coming out and it's like $1 in English. And I was like, whoa, 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 wait a second. Am I like awake? Am I alive? What's going on? So I was really shocked and really happy because I know there are a lot of people out there that had tried this game in the past or just wanted to try something that's completely different from what's on the market in the West. And I know it's a big ask, for gamers to play a game like this that's more fully featured, but all in Japanese, because
Hmm.
there's so much stuff that you just don't know what's going on. But I think this is great, and it can give gamers like a kind of like a bite-sized chunk of what to expect. Remind them, oh yeah, I liked this game, I liked this series, I want to see more. I will say, I mean, it literally is just like the online mode taken out of the most recent 2022 version of Power Pros, like literally down to the logo and stuff like that. Obviously, they changed it to English, but I mean, all of that stuff is the same. So, but at the same time, like the player base is different, so that way different, and there's way more people playing this game that's just $1 or your region's equivalent. So that's pretty
Hmm.
cool.
I also tried it out, and I was a bit surprised that there are more fantasy type of players you can use. Like there's a
Hmm.
Frankenstein guy and a pitcher
Yeah,
who throws some sort of pitch with like sakura petals flying around. Is this
right.
typical in the Power Pro series, or is this kind of an outlier?
I believe you can do this type of stuff in some of the modes. It's typically not the type of stuff that comes up in the modes that I'm playing, but yeah, I mean they do have some kind of crazy weird characters like this that have like these special power-ups. Yeah. I mean, obviously, if you're playing like with a traditional like Japanese pro baseball team in Power Pro 2022, you're not going to see any of that crazy stuff.
Hmm.
Balls whizzing around in circles or something like that. The game can be pretty sim style, like a sim style game, but it does have its opportunities to be silly if it wants to be.
Do you think Konami is sort of testing the waters and bringing the franchise back to the States with this release, or do you feel like it's just kind of a one off?
I think they're absolutely trying that. I think there is a gap for baseball games in the West, particularly North America. Let's be real here. But I mean, the Switch in particular, I mean, it had RBI baseball, and that was it for from like 2017 just up until 2022.
Hmm.
And while it was a passable sometimes way to get your MLB fix, I mean, those games were broken, but I do think they got a lot better over time. But MLB the show came in, and there's really no need for RBI baseball. That game kind of started becoming a little bit more sim like, kind of like the show.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I think the developers, which at the time was MLB Advanced Media, they were involved with the show. So like there is no point to have two kind of similar games on the market. But I think there is a window of opportunity for Konami with something with this visual style. with Japan kind of seemingly maybe being more in the spotlight, internationally and stuff like that. I think that could provide some kind of a better opportunity for them, maybe than what they had back on the Wii and stuff. We'll see. I mean,
Hmm.
super cheap budget title is, I don't know. I don't know if it's a good way to gauge interest. Maybe
Right.
because when you have to pay a whole lot more to have a licensed game with a whole bunch of modes. I don't know how many people are going to bite though, but it is going to
If
be interesting to see.
if they brought it back to the West, do you think they would try to get the MLB license, or would they actually use the NPB license, or try to make it a generic baseball league?
If they brought it to the West, I think they need to do the MLB license. That would be the best way to get the most broad appeal in the United States. I mean, yeah, there are some people I think that would be kind of interested in playing with the Japanese baseball license and stuff like that, but I don't think that's like a huge number. And then too, like, it's weird, man. I don't know what type of issues there are with licensing, Japanese baseball. I know, like, here in Japan, even like streaming rights for, there are two leagues in Japanese baseball. There's a
Hmm.
Central League and a Pacific League, and they each have 6 teams. The Central League has one of the most famous teams there. It's the Yomiuri Giants,
Hmm.
and everybody has probably seen them. One of Tokyo's teams, basically the most popular baseball team in Japan, kind of like the New York Yankees of
Right.
Japan. But like, they have their own, I think, rules for streaming and stuff. Other teams in the Central League have their own rules for streaming, like the Hiroshima Carp, like, only allow people to watch their home games on Hiroshima TV, which is only available in Hiroshima, or something stupid like that. Whereas like the Pacific League with the team that I like, the Lions, they have like their own special pass, like on a variety of different services here in Japan. So you can watch that a little bit easier. So I don't know if that type of stuff would have anything to do with making it a little bit more difficult to bring to America. But sorry, I kind of went off on a tangent. I think focusing on MLB would be a smart thing for Konami to do if they
Hmm.
bring this series back.
The franchise has quite a number of entries on the Switch. How do these games compare? And if someone is interested in picking up a Power Pros game, which one should they get?
So yeah, so the series came back to Nintendo in 2019 as just Jikyo Powerful Pro Yaku, Powerful Pro Baseball, and then the next year they had another one in 2020, and then there was a 2022 version. And some of you guys out there might be thinking like, well, what the heck? They've missed something in between there. But Konami does something that's really great. They work on a 2-year release cycle, so basically your game, it's going to be good in terms of like rosters and like variety of updates and stuff like that for 2 years. So if you're really interested in like up to date rosters and stuff like that, yeah, go for the 2022 version because that supports 2023. But yeah, if you're just trying to look for just a more full fledged baseball game, I don't think you could go wrong with just the GQ Powerful Pro Baseball from 2019 or the 2020 version. There are a couple of modes that are kind of like basically taken out of the game after a certain amount of time, like the live scenario mode I mentioned. For some reason, I didn't actually take a look at my 2020 version to see if it was still there, but looking at, I had Power Pro 2022, and they just started the 2023 live scenario stuff, so I can play like all these scenarios from this year, but
Hmm.
I can't play any of them from the previous year. So
Oh,
that's
okay.
kind of a bummer. It's like, it's kind of like erasing content from the game, but who knows? There's probably some kind of legal or licensing reason for that, I bet. But
There have been a lot of Japanese baseball series like Famistar and Baseball Stars. Why do you
mhm.
think Power Pros managed to become more prominent compared to other Japanese baseball game franchises?
Good question. Because I mean, Famicast's Family Stadium is pretty good, but it just doesn't seem like it releases as consistently as what Power Pros does, and I'm not exactly sure as to why that is. Yeah, good question, man. Hmm. I mean, I think the consistent art style from Power Pros is one thing that does keep people coming back that are really in love with the series. The modes, that's something that keeps people coming back. I do have both of the Famista games on the Switch. There was one that came out in 2018 called Famista Evolution, and then there
Hmm.
was another one that came out in 2020. But I mean, those are both good games. I really liked the 2018 one, and it's kind of like old school RBI baseball. That's where the original RBI baseball comes from. That Family Stadium or Famista series. So the first game on the Switch, it looked really similar to that to an extent, kind of like a more modern version. But in the 2020, they completely like changed to these weird kind of generic me looking Xbox 360 avatar looking characters. And it's just kind of like they're not being consistent with their identity. And I'm not super familiar enough with that franchise to see if that's just a thing that they've been kind of doing over the years. But you look at Power Pros, it's been pretty much the same like visual aesthetic for as long as the game's been around. So I think that familiarity is something that maybe a reason why gamers keep coming back to it.
And last question, one thing I always like about sports games is that there's almost always some sort of overpowered player. Are there any really broken or super powerful characters you remember from the Power Pros franchise?
Well, some of the characters, like some of the guys that are in Major League Baseball now, like Darvish and like Otani and stuff like that, you can actually, quote unquote, purchase them in the game using like credits and stuff that you build up. I'm trying to remember who I had picked up, but I know Darvish, he has some pretty crazy pitches. Like he was working directly with Konami or somehow with them to like kind of develop his character and like the pitches and stuff like that he would have. And yeah, some of those like numbers are crazy. Ichiro was added as like a bonus player last year, not only in Power Pros, but also their Konami's other realistic baseball game called Pro Yaku Spirits. But yeah, and it's kind of weird because they have like two of him, like a younger version and then like a version right before he went to the majors, which is pretty OP, but like not to the point where it felt like cheating. I think, at least in the more recent games, they don't have anybody that I come across that made it just feel like it's a win button type of situation. So
I remember in MLB Power Pros, Daisuke Matsuzaka was pretty powerful because that was when he first came to America. So there's a lot of hype around him. And I think maybe they gave him the gyro ball as well as a pitch you can actually use. So there's definitely a few. They're way better in the game than in real life type of characters every now and then.
Yeah, maybe it's just some kind of like a overreach on the developers. They're like, hey, this dude is going to be amazing. And then like, okay.
Awesome. Well, Danny, I'm glad I got the chat about Power Pros with you. And thanks for joining me. So where can people find you?
So you can find me on Twitter at DannyBiv, DANNYBIV. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm a part of a podcast, website, YouTube channel called the Famicast. We're on Twitter at the Famicast. We're on YouTube, at the Famicast. And we have a website, www.thefamicast.com. Check it out for not just baseball talk, just talk about gaming in Japan and news and stuff like that too.
Great. And listeners, the links to everything will be in the podcast description. Danny, once again, thanks for joining me.
No, Mono, hey, thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate it.
Before we get into games, let's take a brief ad break.
Sequelcast 2 and Friends is a podcast looking at movies in a franchise one film at a time, hosted by me, Matt Bradley Shurgi, Alex, and Thrasher. We also look at video games. We're working through Sierra Online's adventure games from Mystery House all the way up through Gabriel Knight 3 and larger pop culture topics. It's a lot of fun. For more info, go to sequelcast2.com, only on the Tokyo Beat Network.
FYI, I am recording this right before a typhoon, so if there is a weird sound in the background, well, it's that. So, what game should I talk about? Maybe the one the planet has been obsessed with for the past few weeks, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. I'm still neck deep into the game. I've clocked dozens of hours, but I'm still not finished. I would say I'm about halfway, I suppose. I've done 2 dungeons and crossed the halfway mark for the shrines, but I still have a lot of light routes to clear, a bunch of armor to find, quests, side adventures, you name it. Even if I am halfway done, having a whole other half of the game is still incredibly exciting. I don't want to burn through the game though, since I've been waiting 6 years to play it. So it's not something I want to just devour in 2 weeks and then never touch again. I really want to savor it. The next big 3D Zelda could be in 2030 for all we know. Instead of doing a typical mid-game update on my thoughts, I want to share my 5 favorite moments from the game so far. I won't get into major story stuff, but I suppose there will be spoilers for the Rito and Goron dungeons. These aren't in any specific order, but here's 5 moments from Tears of the Kingdom that I absolutely love. Number 1, this is emblematic of the strengths of the emergent gameplay and how everyone can have their own little unique adventures. I was strolling to Kakariko Village fairly early in the game when I heard someone banging on a drum. Now, I had already gone to the fairy fountain, who said she wanted to hear a drum, so I knew this person was important. I go over to talk to him, and he says, fetch 3 honey near the chasm at Kakariko Village. Okay, a fetch quest. Pretty easy, right? Just nab some honey. So I go near the chasm, and sure enough, there's plenty of honey trees. Off in the distance, I see the ice dragon, Nadra, flying around, but it seems a bit too far, so I just kind of ignored it. So I nabbed the honey, boom, done. Though, not quite. I kept hearing the dragon song that plays when you're near a dragon, but I thought, that's weird, the dragon was pretty far away, but now I'm still hearing the song. That's when I turn around and I see the dragon right next to me, diving into the huge chasm. I couldn't believe it. So I run after it, just trying to shoot it for some shards or whatever, when I noticed that you could actually touch the dragon, unlike in Breath of the Wild. So I'm diving down into the dark with the dragon and grab onto it for dear life. Now I'm in complete darkness with the only light emanating from the dragon. I have no idea where I am, where I'm going, but I'm on a dragon, so I might as well make the best of it. I nab some parts off of it, but for most of the trip, I'm just watching the depths pass me by. Now, I had barely been into the depths before this, and so much was completely brand new. The huge Iga bases off in the distance, the glow of the pose, the massive mushroom trees. I was just seeing insane sight after insane sight, all while riding a huge dragon. I must have ridden it for 8 minutes or so, and then it slowly decides to ascend out of the depths and back to the surface. We come out right next to Mount Lanayru, the tallest mountain in Hyrule, and on top of that is a tower. Now, at this point, I hadn't done this tower and was actually trying to think about how on earth I was supposed to even get up there. But now I'm on top of a dragon with the tower in sight. So I dive off the dragon, soar straight to the tower, and activate it. If you ask me, how are you going to get to this tower? I would have never thought that I'd ride a dragon to it. The tower shoots me to the sky, as they do, and I find myself on an island with a snowboarding challenge. I have to snowboard off the island back down to the mountain. So I shield surf straight from the sky and land on the mountain and manage to pass through the rings in time to unlock a shrine. And in that shrine, I lose all my equipment and have to tactically fight floor after floor of constructs, all while using rockets and balloons to ascend to parts of the shrine. I went from a dime a dozen fetch quests looking for honey, to riding a dragon in complete darkness, to flying to the highest mountain, to snowboarding from the sky, to finally fighting a bunch of robots while I was naked. What game escalates like this? And the gameplay sequence is completely unique to my experience. It's not like everyone will say, oh yeah, I did that too. This is probably my favorite gameplay sequence in the game so far, and maybe the best in a game ever. Can number 2 top that? Maybe not, but it's still amazing. My second favorite moment is ascending to the Wind Temple. You can see this huge storm from many spots in Hyrule, and I assumed it was the dungeon, but I had no idea how you would actually get to it. I guessed it would be like Breath of the Wild, where you talk to somebody and then they warp you there. But nope, getting to this huge, massive storm cloud is entirely seamless. Once you start your trek with Tulin, you navigate across broken chunks of huge structures during a storm. Every now and then you jump onto these flying ships, which launch you further into the sky. You're in a raging hurricane trying to navigate across floating blocks and flying boats. There's just enough markers there to help you know that you're making progress. They throw in a shrine every now and then to help you out. But there are moments where you think, am I going the right way? Am I getting higher? Until you near the end and that last big jump throws you so high that you break out of the stormy weather into the clear sky, and then you dive into the dungeon from the top of the huge storm. Words really don't do it justice. Once I realized that I ascended so high that I was above the storm, and then I saw the dungeon right below me, chills. That's all I can say. I know a lot of people like the Goron dungeon more, and that is quite awesome, but the ascent to the Wind Temple was a truly special moment. Number 3 is a bit more grounded. It's the election quest for Hateno Village. Slight spoilers for the questline, so if you haven't done it yet, just skip ahead a bit. Hateno Village was a lot of people's home base in Breath of the Wild. Literally so, because you got a home there. It had a cozy atmosphere where you could relax, no bokoblins in sight. When I headed over there, obviously the first thing that stood out were the mushroom decorations. This was shown off in the trailers, so I knew Hateno had some mushroom thing going on, but I had no idea the extent in which it played into Hateno Village's storyline. After poking around a bit, you soon realize why the whole town is decorated with these gaudy mushroom patterns, and why people wear the goofy mushroom-shaped hats and these Renaissance-era outfits. This leads into the election quest, where a fashion designer is trying to topple the current mayor, who hates that the mushroom trend has taken over the village. The quest involves bribing villagers, playing both sides, spying on multiple people, diving into the village's wells, which are all connected in this absurdly complex cave system, making cheese, and many other amazing mini-adventures. It's brilliant how so many different ideas and gameplay segments tied in together, and the Ateneo Village quest not only has an excellent ending, but it unlocks some great gameplay-related things as well. It reminded me of the Terrytown quest from the first game, something that starts off so innocuous, but by the end it becomes surprisingly complex and emotional. It's my favorite questline or side adventure so far. I'd be shocked if it was topped, but who knows? This game is always filled with surprises, and it's constantly exceeding my expectations. Moment 4, the Hebra Labyrinth questline. Now, I'm a sky guy, so when I saw a huge cube floating off in the distance, well, I had to check it out. I flew one of those anti-grav blocks all the way to the Sky Labyrinth, only to find out that, I need to unlock something on the ground labyrinth before I can even enter the Sky one. So I went to the ground, and another explorer beat me to the punch. Yet, they left pine cones to help me navigate the maze, which is filled with gloom. So not only do you have to pay attention to where you're going, you need to figure out how to traverse the gloom as well. Eventually, I got to the end, activated the dragon ring, and then I returned to the sky. Now, the Sky Labyrinth was not what I expected at all. I needed to flip some switches, pretty typical, but yeah, there's no floor. But there is a lot of air, and the way you navigate this maze is by gliding through the air. If you need to pass under something, you dive a bit, and if you need to go up a bit, you use the paraglider to catch some air. It's incredibly surreal and awesome to navigate a big maze while you're gliding through the air. It can look a bit janky and ridiculous at times, but it felt easy to navigate, and diving to pass under gates, then popping back up was a ton of fun. Okay, so I flip the switches, then go to the top of the labyrinth. Done, right? Give me my prize. Turns out, I'm not done. Traversing this labyrinth opens up a final one in the depths. So 3 completely separate labyrinths that are all connected. And I can dive straight into the depths by jumping off the top of the Sky Labyrinth. After a long dive, now I find myself in a dark underground labyrinth. The final dragon ring is guarded by a level 3 flux construct, something I had never encountered before. Admittedly, I lost easily and had to come back after many hours, but I did return and finally beat it. The reward? Not so great, but the journey was good enough. I had no idea that when I was hovering over to the Sky Labyrinth, that I would have to traverse 3 different ones, each with their own unique challenges. And the crazy thing? There's at least 2 more of these labyrinth challenges. I can't wait to see how they mix it up. And the last moment, honestly, I can go on forever, but let's end with number 5. The Dueling Peaks newspaper mission with Pin. All of these are pretty good, and Pin is maybe the best new character. Awesome design and great personality. But the Dueling Peaks newspaper mission is easily the silliest one, and that's saying something. First of all, Pin is on top of the stable, so you gotta climb up to talk to him, which is a great start. Then he gives you some terrible news. Zelda has been kidnapped. We're going back to that well. According to Pin, she's been snatched by the Yiga clan of all people, and she's in the heart of the Dueling Peaks. Now, I had no idea what this meant, since the center of the Dueling Peaks is just a river. But I set off to the mountains to find the heart of it. I look on the ground, nothing. I climb one of the peaks and notice a cave, but nothing noteworthy was inside. Maybe the other mountain has a cave, though. It's a bit hard to see, so I climbed up to the top of one of the mountains for a vantage point, and then all of a sudden, on the top of the other mountain, I see it. A hollowed out area with Zelda in a big cage. I can't stress enough how absurd this looks. The whole game is about trying to find Zelda. There are multiple questlines and characters obsessed with tracking her down, but here she is just in a big cage on top of a mountain. When you draw closer, yep, it's Zelda in her blue outfit standing there. This is such a goofy thing to see in the game's seamless world. Now, of course, when you talk to her, it's not Zelda. One of the Yiga is disguised as Zelda. You fight them, they go away, case solved. But the absurdity of trying to pretend to be Zelda in a comically large cage, I love it. Who would have guessed that you would just stumble across this in the game world? And that's 5. That's just a sampling of my incredible adventures thus far. I'm definitely not done talking about Tears of the Kingdom on the podcast. Not quite sure how I should structure it, but I'm thinking I might check in again once I beat the game, then do another segment solely about the story and timeline shenanigans. Because there's a lot of shenanigans going on. I might do one check-in before I roll credits though, since I want that to be the absolute last thing I do, but we'll see. That's it for games. Now for the news. Let me get the sad news out of the way. Tokyo-based developer Vanpool has shut down. This literally came out of nowhere as they posted an update on their official site that said they no longer existed. Vanpool is best known as the developers of the Dylan's Rolling Western franchise, and they also co-developed the last few Kirby games, including Return to Dreamland Deluxe, which came out this year. If you remember, I called out Vanpool in my Kirby episode, but now they're gone. Hopefully I didn't jinx anything. You might not have heard their name, but they have a very interesting backstory. Alumni include developers from Love Delique, best known for the RPG Moon, and Love Delique is made of former Square people as well. So Vanpool is definitely closer to Square than not in the 6 degrees of game development. They also worked on the Tingle DS games and co-developed Chibi Robo Ziplash. I assumed that they were in a pretty good spot financially with co-developing the Kirby games. That's a smart franchise to hitch your wagon to, since there's always work there, and sales too. Hopefully we hear more about what happened, and I can see some Vanpool staff maybe making their way over to HAL or some other parts of Nintendo. Now for the game announcements. Perhaps one of the more shocking ones, Everybody 1-2 Switch was finally announced. If you're not sure what this game is, it is a sequel to the launch game for the Switch, 1-2 Switch. Now, this was originally talked about by Emily Rogers last year. She mentioned the game by name and said that it was internally very poorly received. A few months later, Fanbyte's Imran Khan wrote an article about Everybody 1-2 Switch saying that it was infamously bad and that Nintendo had no idea what to do with it. But now they're throwing it out there. It's a $30 release, physical and digital, and it comes out June 30th. This game kind of seems like a Jackbox style of game. It's hard to tell since there's very little screenshots or even information. Even the tweet is pretty blunt and a little cold. I think it's quite obvious they just want to get it out there. They made it and it got this far, so they don't want to cancel it or put it in a vault. You might as well try to make some money with it. And it's coming out in between Zelda and Pikmin. One game, a masterpiece. Pikmin will probably also be great. So even if it is mediocre, I think it'll be easily forgotten. And the $30 price tag doesn't really hurt. But I'm curious to see if it's still infamously bad or if they bumped it up to mediocre and forgettable. Will we be talking about this game at the end of the year in a worst of 2023 game list, for example? I think Gollum maybe has that on lock. Some other game announcements, a new Dragon Quest Monsters game is coming to Switch. When? Who knows, but it's coming. This is the first DQM title since Joker 3 in 2016. Did you know that there are actually Dragon Quest Monsters games on the Switch already? The first game was ported to the Switch in 2019. But yeah, Japan only. I believe this is actually a phone port of the original Game Boy game. But I was a big fan of that original game, and it was a late 90s Pokemon clone that had a lot going for it. I'm not quite sure how popular the Joker series was, but I think dropping the name is pretty smart. Start fresh. DQ Treasures from last year kind of had Monsters vibes to it, but it's good to see Square Enix return to the Monsters name. But yeah, we don't have a whole lot to go off on for now. Will this game come out before Dragon Quest III HD 2D? I mean, it has a shot. Some other new games, hey, Sony had a big showcase. A lot of people disliked it, but I thought it was fine. There were plenty of 2023 games, which is what I want out of these showcases. What am I going to be playing this year? I don't care about some teaser trailer for a game 4 years away. I want something that I can play before Christmas. But the big announcements were CG trailers of games that are years away. Most notable, Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater, a remake of Metal Gear Solid 3. According to some interviews, it is developed in-house by Konami, so they are not farming it off to Bluepoint or whoever. It will also not be a PS exclusive. Xbox is also getting the game. I love MGS3, so I'm immediately interested, but I do wonder how much of a remake is this going to be. Some news came out that they are going to use the exact same voice lines from the original game, so is this just a straight one-to-one remake with no real additions? It doesn't look like a FF7 style reimagining, or even a Resident Evil-esque remake with a lot of new features. Maybe I'm jumping the gun a bit though. Perhaps the story will be the same, but there'll be more gameplay segments. A Kojima-less Metal Gear, it'll certainly be interesting. Since this is a remake, I don't think it will feel too foreign, but I'm sure they tweaked enough that Metal Gear hardcores will notice it and think, wait, something is wrong. I have no real objections when it comes to completely rebooting Metal Gear. I don't think you inherently need Kojima to make a good MGS game. The groundwork is already there. But Konami seems to be taking the most cautious route when it comes to revitalizing the franchise. But I wonder if that will be enough. Oh, and MGS 1, 2, and 3 are being re-released in a collection. No Switch port announced yet, but the Switch can run PS2 games, so why not? Interestingly enough, this is labeled Volume 1, so what's in Volume 2? MGS4 would be a huge addition since that game is still locked to the PS3. I've also never played Ghost Babel or Peace Walker, so a Volume 2 with those 3 games in it would be incredibly tempting. I'm still pulling for Konami to just add Ghost Babel to NSO, but that seems a bit unlikely. Okay, let's wrap it up. Thanks as always for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast on your favorite app. Leave a 5-star review as well. It helps with visibility. This podcast is also available on YouTube, so like and subscribe there as well. I also recently posted a brand new video exclusive to YouTube, so check it out. It's about 84 Hashi, a secret Nintendo cafe, which I will talk about on the podcast in the future. I'm on Twitter and Instagram. Just search for tokyogamelife or find the links in the podcast description. If you like the podcast, be sure to share it with your friends and on social media. If there's anything you want me to talk about or cover, don't be shy, just message me on Twitter. The next episode will be on June 18th. See you next time. Matane!